Hey Internet, welcome to Worldview Everlasting, your favorite YouTube addiction. And this is The Fix. Last week, we heard the first half of St. Peter's sermon on the day of Pentecost, preaching to thousands of faithful Jews who had come to Jerusalem because they were waiting for the promises of God to be fulfilled. It cannot be stressed enough that while not diminishing the miraculous nature of God's gift to them, converting so many at one time, which is certainly His doing and not ours, these were not cold conversions of people who knew nothing about Christ. That happens later. For example, with Cornelius or the Ethiopian eunuch. But these are Old Testament believers. No doubt weak in their flesh and imperfect, but believers all the same. And this is the moment marking their transition out of the Old Covenant faith, which had passed away when Jesus died, and their entry into the New Covenant faith, which will never end. Men of Israel, hear these words, Peter said again, starting at verse 22 of chapter 2. And expositing on the meaning of the text from Joel about the last days and the pouring out of the Holy Spirit that he had just quoted. Jesus of Nazareth, a man attested to you by God with mighty works and wonders and signs that God did through him in your midst, as you yourselves know. This Jesus, delivered up according to the definite plan of God, you crucified and killed by the hands of lawless men. God raised him up, loosing the pangs of death, because it was not possible for him to be held by it. There it is, the gospel, who Jesus is and what he's done, the power of God for salvation to all who believe it. It's not flashy, it's not culturally conditioned, it's not an idea or a set of platitudes, it's not a spirituality. It might be even optional for you to actually believe it, but it is not optional with regards to reality. And don't miss this. This is the meaning of Joel 2, according to Peter. The sun being made dark, the moon being made blood, prophecy poured out on all people. Jesus died and rose again. I know it never seems like it, though that has more to do probably with you being a lazy American who just wants your flesh tickled than anything else, but the moment when you stand up in the service and recite verbatim, word for word, the Apostles' Creed, that is the fulfillment of the work of the Holy Spirit in our midst. That is the meaning of Joel's prophecy. Not signs and wonders, not fire on your head, no dreams pulled out of last night's dinner about avoiding falling pianos or deciding which blouse to wear. The plain and simple repetition, confession, speaking back to God of what God has spoken into reality for your sake and for all mankind. He was crucified under Pontius Pilate, prophecy. Dead and buried, prophecy. He rose again on the third day, prophecy. He will come again to judge, prophecy. And the only hope of mankind in an age of lies, spin, conditioning, brainwashing, consumerized flesh tickling, and anti-truth pleasure seeking is that same prophecy. For the sake of the faithful Jews who knew their Bible much better than you probably do, Peter then proves that this is the only real point of the entire Bible by quoting David. As David prophesies his confidence that he will not remain dead after he dies because God has promised that it will be so. Peter then points to the tomb of David nearby and says, well, what does this mean? He's right over there. You can dig up his bones. He's clearly still dead. What it means is that David knew that the descendant God had promised to put on his throne would also beat death in his place. And so in beating death, beat death for everybody else as well. That's what Jesus did. And Peter says of that fact that he and the apostles are eyewitnesses. Now, the word witness gets too much play in American spiritualism today, as people give their witness about this and about that and whatever. But the biblical witness isn't about what you've experienced. It's about what the apostles themselves saw, which you've now heard about and which you prophesy by confessing, again, without alteration, what they've said. Jesus is exalted to heaven. Jesus has poured out his Spirit that you might trust this for the sake of your life with God in the future. Let all the world know for certain that this Jesus is both Gentile Lord and Hebrew King, the crucified one who still bears the scars of his glorious ascension. Now, when the faithful Jews heard that, they believed it, because they're believers. They believed, and according to Peter's words, they were baptized. For in baptism is given the promise that this work Jesus did on the cross is for you too. It's hilarious how adamantly the average American spiritist who doesn't know his Bible at all still resents the wholly biblical idea that baptism does something, over and against all the clear present texts in the Bible on the matter. So right there in 2:38 to 39 as well, it says baptism gives forgiveness, the Holy Spirit comes through baptism, and baptism is for children and Gentiles alike. No one debated Peter there, and I will not presume to debate him here. Bible-believing Christianity, which is the only one that will will survive the coming storm of cultural chaos that is already battering us with its winds, devotes itself to the apostles' teachings, not to our dreams or our reasons or our own understandings, but to their words, and with that to the koinonia that comes when their words are given along with things like water, bread, and wine, and then the liturgy that we've inherited that gives these things to us again. Pentecost and Peter's preaching, the first ever baptism day in which the name of the Trinity comes to mark. The name of God is never void, and neither is the prophecy of who he is and what he has done in Jesus for you, confessed aloud by you. Do it this Trinity Sunday with the Athanasian Creed for extra bonus points. Catch you next time. Rock on.